Well, hello there, and thank you for tuning in to Unapologetically Purple. This is your podcast host. This is Yadida, and I know I don't sound as bright and bubbly as I usually do, and that's it. It's a good thing. There are times when we need that. We need the bright and bubbly, right? We need the made up and the makeup and the filters and all of those things, because those are the things that give us hope. Sometimes, it makes people feel good to be able to look at someone and say, oh, everything looks like it's going great for them, and it can get great for me too. But then there are times when we don't want that. We want the real. We want the hard story. We want to feel that someone else feels pain, someone else has concerns, someone else doesn't know what to do. We're not the only ones. And so today I wanted to come on and share with you about my experience in the midst of this COVID pandemic. It's something I really tried not to talk about. I would pray for people and all of those things. But we have to talk sometimes. I don't know about you. I am most encouraged by those who have gone through difficulties, those who come out on the other side and share their story. Their story sometimes that's filled with pain and maybe even a little bit of confusion or some misunderstanding or some challenge. And so, coming on today to talk to you. First of all, thank you for tuning in. There are many podcasts out there that you can listen to. But I thank you for tuning into Unapologetically Purple, and I also have Pep Talk with Yadida and Real Talk with Yadida, because sometimes we just have to have some real talk. There, no fluff, no hiding, no shame, no guilt, but real conversations about real things, about real people. And so if you don't know me, I am a mom. And my acronym for MOM, M-O-M, is Mom on the Move. And I hope you are too, even if you feel like you're not moving as quickly as you want to or as quickly as people think you should. You're still moving and you're still a mom. If you're taking care of children, a child, you're a parent. And they need you. And we need you to keep on going, even when you feel like you can't. And so, this pandemic may have caught some people off guard, unawares. Of course, there were some who were prepared, some who tried to be prepared. Sometimes you just don't know. When it's like a storm. In my book, Don't Give Up, I have a chapter that talks about the God who walks through the garden. And in that chapter, it speaks about how I used to love to go to the garden, the botanical gardens. And I would love to go there and look at the flowers and smell the sweet aroma of the lilac and the lilies, listening to the birds as they chirped. It was beautiful. It was peaceful there. And it almost seemed to me like the flowers were decked out in beautiful array, dressed up almost like little children on the first day of school, saying, "Look at me, look at me." I loved that. But then there were also times when a storm was coming. And in those moments, it seemed like the petals used to kind of close in and the flower itself would bend over as if it were about to embrace for an impending storm. We're a lot like that too. We're like that flower, that tree that's trying to take its roots and dig deep into the ground as the wind blows, sometimes harder than we expect. And as we bend and sway with the torrential downpour and the harsh winds, we embrace the inevitable and even the unexpected. This is what we do. For me, this whole pandemic, COVID, was definitely unexpected, like for many others. I had on my other podcast how we relocated from New York, my daughter and I. And I am a dreamer. I'm a person who dreams. I believe God speaks to me. I know He does through dreams. And so I had a dream back in February of 2018, February 28th. And that dream, it bothered me because I saw these black and white tigers that were running through New York City towards people who were not aware that they were running in their direction. And the people were simply talking and laughing and having a good time. And I was looking down from above, and I just looked and I said, oh gosh, they don't see these tigers coming. And behind the tiger, there was this great big lion. And I heard the news radio commentator, whatever we want to say, saying, close your windows, lock your doors, the tigers, the tigers. I remember seeing a little old lady on a bench sitting outside of the projects, and in this dream I went over to her and I said, ma'am, you should go inside. Did you hear that the tigers are here? And she basically ignored me. And the tigers came. And so, the year after that, it was greatly impressed on my heart that it was time to get out of New York, a city where I grew up, a city where I have loved ones, a city where I went to a public school and used to have to fight in order to go home because of the bullies. But it was still a city that I wouldn't say I loved it, but I definitely did like many of the experiences that I had there. And so we prepared for our next move to a pretty unknown place to us. A lot of people say I'm a Southern girl, even though I was not born in the South. And so we left, not knowing that our city was going to go through one of the most difficult times that it would ever experience. That besides 9/11 are two in my time that I remember that were very traumatic for the city. And it was a time where people came together. Not as much crime in the streets. People who normally wouldn't speak to each other were talking and embracing and finally loving on each other. But this was different. This pandemic, people weren't able to go and embrace and hug each other like they were used to doing. Instead, there was this stay at home that turned into a 6 feet apart. No embraces. And people's smiles were hidden behind masks. Many were. A smile that I'm sure many people would have loved to see and would have embraced in this time. But that was not so. So today, I'm saddened. I'm touched. I feel the pain of those who have grieved and suffered loss. Not only loss of jobs, loss of loved ones. Loved ones who they didn't even have the opportunity to say goodbye to. People who had operations and did not have their loved ones able to come and be with them, even after they were going through the recovery process. And yet and still there were many other things that ensued. For instance, I cannot believe that right after this pandemic, a young man is jogging, probably trying to get some exercise, tired of being locked in, and finally is saying, let me get out, let me go and run. And his life is taken for no reason. And I look and I say, is this what it has come to? And there are others who have lost their lives unnecessarily. It saddens me deeply. And for most people who have a heart, it will sadden you too. For me, as my daughter's caregiver, we celebrated in April the fact that she had not had a seizure in about a year. That was so exciting. It was my birthday, and that for me was one of the best gifts ever. For those of you who are caregivers, I've been concerned about you, and I've been praying for you, because I've been on your Facebook page, or pages, the epilepsy caregivers page, and some of the other pages that are out there. And, before we ever experienced anything like this, it was not anywhere on my radar. Not epilepsy, not EEGs, not prescription drugs, none of that. But when these things happen, you look at your life differently, you look at your child's life differently, and you look at people differently, and you look at yourself differently. And I say you look at people differently because there were two instances that stuck out for me after her diagnosis. And one was I started to do a lot of research, as you should do as a parent, and try to find out what it is that you're dealing with because you've never dealt with it before. And so you search and you look at what affects your loved one, whether it's the flashing lights, whether it's heightened stress, whether it's touch if they're dealing with sensory issues or challenges, whether it's the light bulbs in your home that were there before you got there, the CFLs that have the high flicker rate that affect children with autism and people with epilepsy. And you go to the school and you advocate and you fight for your child day in and day out. I've usually been a lamb in my life, a quiet woman, peaceful. But having a child will change that and will cause you to start to have to roar and open your mouth and stick up for them. because sometimes they're not able to stick up for themselves, and instead of people being kind, they become bullies. Bullies in the school setting, bullies outside of the school setting. And I've looked on the pages, and I've seen caregivers who should be supported, who instead are struggling. I didn't understand some of the things they dealt with at first. I remember looking at one YouTube channel, and there was a dad who had put up the story about his son. And it was, in the beginning, it was odd to me, because this little boy, in the beginning, he had like this beautiful blonde hair. He kind of had it cut, I don't know if you call it like a bowl cut, a little blunt cut, his little fat cheeks. And his dad, was talking about how when he was first diagnosed, and how he continued to have these seizures, and as he had the seizures, he continued to change. He wasn't the same little bright, bubbly, happy little boy as he was before. As a matter of fact, to me, he didn't even look like the same child. He looked different. And that was really, it made me sad. It made his parents sad. And I'm sure the little boy was sad as well. And I believe it's important to give voice to our children. They need to be able to speak about how they feel. Now, I know back in the day when I was growing up, children were only to be seen and not heard, and I promised myself that I was not going to raise my child like that. Because of it, of course, I've, experienced people's opinions, and everyone's allowed to have one. Even I have an opinion. But it doesn't mean that I agree with it. And you don't have to either. I mean, that's what being unapologetically purple is all about. It's embracing you and your story, a story that many people don't understand and won't even take time out to understand. And I get that too. Who wants to try to understand what another person is experiencing in this world where there's so much going on, and everybody is in their own space, their own cloud? That was one YouTube story that stuck out for me. And then when I was on the epilepsy page, the Caregivers for Children with Epilepsy, and I would see parents who were talking about how their loved ones, their parents, their siblings, their bosses, and even their friends were basically, instead of covering and comforting, they were ridiculing them and making comments about their children. And although, yes, I've experienced that, it's a little bit different when you have your own space and you're able to close your door and say, it's just us now. But COVID changed that for me. I believe I told you about how we relocated, and I'm very concerned about landlords and what they do to tenants. And there are laws that talk about when a landlord puts a tenant into an apartment that they know is uninhabitable, that has mold, that has all kinds of things, and that I won't even say right now, but if you've experienced it, it's very upsetting. And so for us, we were told about this beautiful apartment that turned out being something else. And I found myself writing multiple emails and having many meetings over and over again, even with a friend who would come and would talk about how upset she was that they were doing what they were doing. But yet they had a choice. We all have a choice to listen. We all have a choice to do better. But humanity can be very unkind sometimes. And what do you do when it's unkind to you and your child? The main thing, parent, you do is you keep going. Even when you want to give up, you don't. You keep on fighting. Even when you feel like you don't have enough strength to do it. It has to get better. And so I had to make a decision. My decision was the black mold. I was looking at our skin starting to change, and I knew it was unhealthy. I hired an environmental inspector who charged me, I guess it was about $260. Was it $230 or $260, whatever it was. And when they said it was mildew, he verified it was mold, and I got the reports, and there was 8 different types of mold, he said. And I wondered, why would someone do this? Even when they knew I told them that I had a child with a medical condition, why didn't it matter? Regretfully, we do live in a society where people sometimes don't care because it's not their experience. And you will find yourself fighting a battle and feeling like you're all alone. For me, this is where God comes in every time. And if it wasn't for him, truthfully, I don't know where I would be. And so we relocated. I packed our things up after even attempting to take them to court. Have you ever been there? You know you're right. You've got all the documentation, but they never looked at your stuff. Well, that's what happened to us. And then on my court date, because I put mine in first, they actually stood there and said, oh, she's not suing us. She's suing the people on her lease. But when I looked it up, but yet, let me back up. If I'm making my payments to them, why did they accept the payments? If the person that, or the company they put on the lease was not them. These are the things that people in this world do. And then we wonder sometimes about God. God, why this, why that? Could it be that God is looking down knowing that he created us to love him and to love each other, and he sees opposite, and the world feels the opposite. The world feels hatred. And so we moved, and I'm segueing because I used to read how the caregivers would talk about how their family members were sometimes commenting and making critical judgments on how they were raising their children, or saying that, that's nothing. But it's not until you live in a situation that you know the truth. I wish the world was more kind and loving. I wish the world didn't judge so hard about things they don't even know or understand. And so I got to experience what it was not to just be with me and my daughter in the midst of a pandemic. And I was able to experience what it felt like for people to question my parenting. And to speak about my child. And if you're a parent, no parent likes for people to talk about their child. It just brings something out in you and doesn't make you feel good. It makes you very upset. And so for those of you who know people who have children with epilepsy or any other condition, I don't care if it's autism or cancer. It seems sometimes when it comes to cancer, people are a lot more empathetic. They're a lot more loving when it's a child with cancer. than they are when it's a child with epilepsy. And that should not be. When it comes to neurological disorders, when it comes to even mental illnesses, which epilepsy is not, it's a medical disorder, it's a medical condition. However, because it affects the brain, it presents sometimes as if it could be something that is a mental illness. But it is not. And even if it were, what's so hard about being kind? We have to do better. So I got to experience what many of the other parents experienced, and it was very difficult, because I believe you should be able to stick up for your child. And I know that some of you parents, I want to add this here too. When you do have a child with special needs, a mental disability, disorder, whatever it is, if you've experienced Kepper rage, my heart goes out to you. Because no one can understand what it is for you sometimes to have to stand up and take a stance and hold your child or prevent them from whatever it is. And let's admit it, you feel angry too sometimes. You feel disappointed too sometimes. And you feel even upset with yourself, because sometimes you wonder, what did you do, if anything, for your child who may have even once been healthy to have a condition? And believe me, sometimes it's not that you did anything at all. So please don't blame yourself. But anyway, yes, it was difficult. If you don't have your own space, maybe you are in a shelter, my heart goes out to you as well. And I'm going to say this to you, it's not that you don't try. I get it. It's not that you don't want to be in a good place. Sometimes you just are trying to figure out how after you've experienced changes. And no one should be shamed for that either. And if you have been, I know that that is very painful and very hurtful when you're already trying to figure things out and struggle and you're being ridiculed and judged. I've been there. And that hurts. It hurts to be lied on when you know you're telling the truth and no one wants to listen. It does. And I've spoken with people who have gone through things like that. But you always have to keep going and looking for hope. You know, I'm thinking about this thing that sometimes it's almost as if, well, at least I thought this when I became a born-again believer, that the sun was always supposed to be shining and it was a happy day every day. Well, even Jesus didn't have happy days every day, so that's not true. Jesus wept. He felt pain. He was ridiculed. He was judged. He was a lot of things. But he went through it so that we know that we can too. And so my main thing for you is, it's two audiences I want to speak to today. Because I am a firm believer that your story is not just for you. You've got to share it. You know, I'm looking at my podcast right now, and I use Spreaker. And I'm looking at this broken heart, and it's been there before, and I guess I never really paid attention to it. So if your heart is broken today, I want to talk to you. And I also want to talk to people who have been unkind to those who are in situations that you don't understand. For those who are going through it, and I don't know what your it is. If you've lost a loved one, they've transitioned. If you've lost your finances, your job, if you're trying to figure out how you're going to make it, I want you to first of all know that you are not alone. Your thoughts, the enemy, the world will make you feel like you're alone in an empty space, sometimes just you and your child, you and your family against the world. Believe me, there are others who are trying to figure it out too. And I want to say this. I know there are times when you don't want to reach out and talk to anyone and tell them your story, because it is true. Some people will take your story and twist it and throw it right back up in your face. And it's nothing like what you said or how you told them. I know this is true. I've heard other people say they've gone through things when I say you need to open up and you need to share. You still need to share with someone. First, I will always tell you to share with God. And after you share with God, I pray that there will be someone who has a pure heart with good intentions, who will not wound you any further. I would tell you to get into the Word of God and look for scriptures. Go on your phone and look for scriptures about the brokenhearted. Look for scriptures about what does God say to me. So now you're going to walk with me, because you all know me. It's real life. It's a real podcast. What I decided I wanted to find was, I told you before that I have these scriptures that I write down for you all to encourage you. And I have them on this little, it's like a little ring thing, little cards, so that I can flip through them when I need to. So let me just read some to you, because I know many of you are going through, and even if your child is not dealing with an illness or your loved one or whatever it is, you're still a little saddened about many of these things that are happening. So let me read something to you just to encourage you, and you can write it down yourself. You know, I want to say this: weeping may endure for the night, but joy comes in the morning. And even though that's not in my set here, you can Google that. So you are going to cry, you are going to weep. It's true. But joy is going to come in the morning, and that morning may not be in 24 hours, but you've got to keep looking for it. You have to keep telling yourself that I am going to smile again. I'm going to laugh again. And most of all, that I can go through this because I am not alone. I will call on God for his help. And if you've been angry with God, Please don't be. We need him. We need God's help. And you may be saying, well, God is not a him. God is a spirit. So just grab that. But we need God. Here's one. Psalm 37:7. Rest in the Lord and wait patiently for him. Do not fret because of him who prospers in his way, because of the man who bringeth wicked devices to pass. Don't fret because of those things. Isaiah 49:15 is one of my favorite. It says, can a woman forget her nursing child and not have compassion on the son of her womb? Yea, they may forget, yet I will not forget you. In other words, can a woman forget her child who's sucking at her paps, who she's breastfeeding or whatever? He's basically saying she can't forget her child, so I cannot forget you. I will not forget you. God has not forgotten you. Here's another one. And I'm going to read this one to you. And I'll explain it, why it's important for you to know this one. It's Ephesians 6:12. And it says, for we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. And even though I don't have the rest here, I want you to read this because it tells us to put on the whole armor of God. And the armor of God is the breastplate of righteousness and the helmet of salvation and all of these things. You need something to cover your heart and your mind in difficult times. That's why I say, grab these scriptures, quote the word of God, keep talking, keep encouraging. Sometimes you will have to even encourage yourself, but do it. Sometimes you're going to have to look at yourself and say, come on, get up, get up, get up, get up. Let me get up from here. I got to get up. I got to get up. I have to do this. Many times you will need to look at your child, as I do mine, and say, honey, mommy is always working to make it better. And I want to say this too. I know when you're trying to figure things out that you feel like you have to keep doing, and you're on your computer, you're on your phone, because you feel responsible, not irresponsible, as some might say you are. You feel responsible because you have not figured it out yet. Even if it's been years, you haven't figured it out and you're upset with yourself and you feel ashamed or whatever it is. Just keep trying. Take those moments and spend them with your child, and you've got to tell your brain to slow down sometimes. You might be an entrepreneur and you're trying to get that business together because you know you have a child that you're taking care of. And it takes time to get your website together. I feel like I fought with my website, but I got it. I won the battle. And you try to get it together. And I don't know about you, but I have business coaches who say you got to get out there, right? Got to get out there. And I love talking to you all. And sometimes as entrepreneurs, we feel like when we look at other people's pages or whatever it is, you feel like you're not enough, but you are. You feel like they're doing it better than you. Maybe they might be, maybe they're not. You feel like they have it all together and you don't. Like that family has it all together. That husband and wife, that business, whatever it is, your today is not necessarily what your tomorrow will look like. I don't care how bleak it looks. You've got to pick yourself up. You've got to look at your child. You've got to look at yourself. And let me say this, you've got to look at yourself. There are times when we constantly find ourselves pouring and trying to do things for our children. And as parents, we just forget about us. And if you're not well, if you're not sick, how can you take care of them? So if that means finding someone who is going to be non-judgmental, because the people that you know have been judging you and treating you and calling you out of your name and treating you wrongfully and making you feel stupid, then do something else. Find a therapist. Go online and find someone to talk to who is going to be, what's the word? They're going to be able to look at your life from a different lens than other people do, because other people, they just don't get what you're going through. But don't clam up. Don't try to shrivel up and die. Live, breathe, move, keep going. Even when you don't see the answer, keep on going. Because it's got to get better. And now I want to speak to those who know people who are caregivers. Whether you're a teacher, whether you're in education, whether you're a friend, a relative, a family member, whatever you are, whoever you are in this community, I am pleading with you. Do not give them a hard time, even if you have. Some of you have divorced your spouses. You've left them. You've left your children. And I get it, it's not easy. But they need you. They don't need more people picking at them or giving them a hard way to go. They need people who are going to love them and not act like they have all the answers, because if you're a person who feels like you have all the answers, you're lying to yourself. You don't. You will never have all the answers, and you will never know what that person is experiencing until you have walked in their shoes, until you have cried their tears, and until you have felt their pain. Please stop making things difficult for people who are not in your situation. It's not fair, and it's not what God would have you to do. If you are a spouse, a woman, a man who left someone because of their illness, I wish you would apologize to them. Even if you were scared, looking at someone have a seizure, it can be scary. It can be frightening. But that doesn't mean that you should run. If you're a parent who's struggling with a child who has an illness, I want you to know it's okay for you to take a time out. We really don't understand what they're dealing with either. And neither do they understand what we are dealing with. But we have to do this together. And reach out. You can reach out to me. I had a talk with a woman who, when I went on for my birthday and was talking about how my daughter We were thanking God she hadn't had a seizure in a very long time. Someone heard it and had a woman call me, and I was able to kind of coach her through some of the things that she should purchase for her child, because she's frustrated, just like many. If you tell the truth is what sets us free. As long as we try to hide our true feelings, our frustration, our anxiety, and these are words that God can heal us from and He can carry us through. But the truth is, anyone that I know of in the Bible who got help, they dealt with the truth. Jesus, I'm sick. Jesus, I'm tired. Jesus, my child is sick. Jesus, my child is filled with whatever. Or my loved one. Help us. And He did. And He still does. And so, parent, I understand the frustration. I've dealt with Kepper rage. I know what it's like to watch your child change. But I know what it's like to see their bravery in the face of all that they go through. And so when we get upset, as human beings do, we know the importance of an apology to our children. And we teach them the importance of their apology to us. Because sometimes they don't get it either. They don't know how you cry at the sink when you don't want to see them or have them see you crying, because you just don't know what to do. And many of you, I've seen your struggles. You've had to leave work. And I'm going to say this because the world is so mean. You're not a freeloader. I've heard words, harsh words. You're not. You just don't know what to do. What if these things that are touching our hearts, these struggles that you and I are facing, are the very thing that we're supposed to be advocating for? What if? What if you've been struggling, you've almost lost your apartment or lost it, or ended up homeless, not because you're lazy. That's not true. Not because you're stupid, not because you're a child, but just because you're trying to deal with all of the trauma. You're trying to make it happen alone when God never ever intended for us to live this world alone. And I think it's wrong for people to try to make you or me feel like we were supposed to have gotten this whole thing together by ourselves. Sometimes you just don't know how. So I'm going to pray that I figure it out, not for me alone, but for you too. Because I know what it feels like to be broken when you just don't know. You try, but sometimes you just have to keep trying until you get it, till you get it straight. You have to keep trying. So those of you who are unkind, or if you have been, I wish you would stop it. I wish you would just stop and go and help that man, that woman. Ask God to touch your heart so that the venom doesn't spew out, or your judgment or your cruelty doesn't go on a person who is already down. People don't need your foot on top of them when you're down already. Humanity has got to do better. Humanity has got to be kinder. Well, I feel like I've covered all of my points for today. But my main point is that even though this world has changed and this pandemic has crushed many people, there can be nothing that is greater than the power of God. And so continue to invite him into your very own situation, which is not small at all compared to others. It's just your situation. Hopefully next time I'll sound more bubbly. But I felt like I needed to come on and talk to you, so that just in case you're not feeling that bright, bubbly self that you're used to, that you know it's okay. That you can feel your feelings, because if God never meant for us to have these feelings, he wouldn't have given it to us. We should just be happy all the time or whatever. But continue to have faith and believe for a brighter day, and be safe out there, y'all. I don't know if people even really know what's going on, but try not to be consumed with it. You still have other things that you need to do. I still have things I need to do. And then sometimes you just need to stop and rest. And you're not lazy because you stop. Our bodies were not created to feel this amount of stress. So stop when you need to rest. Turn on I listen to soaking music, SOAKING, and I listen to it and I meditate on God and I pray. And I decree and I declare that things will get better. This is your podcast host. I hope you enjoyed this. I'm kidding, y'all. Anyway, if you'd like to go to the website, I'll get the podcast up over there too. But for now, there's some things I've been working on for you, because I know what it feels like to not know where to find the answer. And when you don't feel like explaining yourself, don't do it. People are not listening sometimes anyway, so just stop. You don't owe anyone an explanation for your reality, especially when they're not listening anyway. Just save yourself the trouble and don't do it. Okay? This is your big sister telling you that. Might be younger than you, but this is me telling you that. Website's www.yeditaspan.com. www.yeditaspan.com. That's YEDIDAH. Keep going. And stay tuned. And don't give up. You can get the book. I usually don't say that here, but it's on Amazon. I feel like it's on Ingram Spark now. It should be as well. And the good news is I finally finished recording the audio book, and I should have that for you pretty soon for those of you who would rather just listen. We just had to make a couple of tweaks to that. So I've been doing some things for you in the background because I care. And if you do anything, make sure you lead from your heart. You live from the heart. And if your heart is broken or wounded, be sure to get it healed so you don't hurt others in the process. And believe me, we've all had broken hearts. But you can be healed of a broken heart. God says you can. So do whatever you need to make that happen. This is your podcast host. This is Yadida. And you've been listening to Unapologetically Purple. So be unapologetically